Picture this. You land at Soekarno-Hatta International Airport. You grab a taxi, and then nothing. You don't move. You haven't moved in 40 minutes. The road ahead of you looks like a parking lot that stretches all the way to the sea. Welcome to Jakarta, one of the most congested cities on Earth. But here is the twist. What looked like a disaster to the rest of the world looked like an opportunity to a handful of Indonesian entrepreneurs. And what they built in response didn't just solve a local problem. It reshaped the entire economy of Southeast Asia. This is the story of how Indonesia turned its worst traffic jam into a $10 billion empire. Welcome to All Indonesia, the channel where we explore everything that makes this extraordinary archipelago so fascinating. Today we are going deep on one of the most counterintuitive economic stories of the 21st century. It starts with traffic. Terrible, soul-crushing, exhaust fume-soaked traffic. And it ends with unicorns. Not the magical horse kind, but the startup kind, worth billions of dollars. To understand why Gojek and Grab became what they became, you first have to understand what Jakarta is actually like to live in. Jakarta is home to over 30 million people in its greater metropolitan area, making it one of the largest urban agglomerations on the planet. The city was designed for far fewer people, and the road infrastructure, despite decades of investment, has simply never kept pace with the speed of population growth. At its peak, traffic congestion was costing the Jakarta economy an estimated 65 trillion Indonesian rupiah every single year. That's roughly $4.5 billion US in lost productivity, wasted fuel, and opportunity costs. People weren't just late for meetings. They were losing hours of their lives, every day sitting still. But there's something outsiders usually miss when they look at this gridlock. It isn't complete chaos. There's an underlying system operating right inside the disorder. And the most critical part of that system, the layer that kept the city moving decades before anyone ever downloaded a smartphone app, is the Ojek. An Ojek is simply a motorcycle taxi. The concept is completely low-tech. You need to get across town, and a rider takes you there. No meters, no corporate backing, just a negotiated cash fare, and a rider willing to squeeze through gaps that a car physically cannot penetrate. Ojek drivers have existed in Indonesia for generations. Long before Silicon Valley had heard of the gig economy, Indonesian Ojek drivers were operating one of the world's first on-demand human logistics networks, running entirely on trust, local knowledge, and word of mouth. The Pangkalan, the informal Ojek gathering point, was the original dispatch system. Every neighborhood had one. Drivers would sit, drink coffee, smoke Kretek cigarettes, and wait for customers who knew exactly which corner to walk to. It was hyper-local, deeply community-based, and for decades it worked exactly well and well. When people in the West think of ride-hailing startups, they think of Uber launching in San Francisco back in 2009. They picture venture capital pouring into a slick app and a technology landing in a market to completely change consumer behavior. But in Indonesia, it happened in reverse. The technology didn't create a new behavior, it just found a system that already existed and gave it a phone number. Gojek was founded in 2010 by Nadia Makarim. He grew up watching his family's driver spend far more time stuck idling in Jakarta's gridlock than actually driving. His initial insight wasn't technological, it was human. He noticed that Ojek riders spent hours sitting at roadside stands waiting for a fare, while customers just a few streets away were looking for a ride. The supply and demand were there, they just had no way to find each other. Makarim's original solution wasn't an app, it was a literal call center. You dialed a phone number, a dispatcher manually matched you to the nearest rider, and the driver came to you. That was the entire product. The smartphone app didn't drop until 2015, but when mobile data became cheap enough and smartphone adoption took off, the growth was explosive. By 2016, Gojek had expanded from passenger rides into food delivery, couriers, digital payments, and grocery runs. It aggregated an entire informal economy onto a single interface. By 2019, Gojek hit a $10 billion valuation, making it Indonesia's very first decacorn. And it did it by making the traditional rider more efficient, with early drivers seeing income increases of 40 to 70%. Then came Grab. Founded in Malaysia in 2012 by Anthony Tan and Tan Hui Ling, also Harvard grads, Grab started with taxis and targeted all of Southeast Asia. It rolled into Indonesia as a foreign challenger on Gojek's home turf. What followed was one of the fiercest startup wars in Southeast Asian history, billions in subsidies, deeply discounted fares, and loyalty perks. A bidding war for the phones of Indonesian commuters. At its peak, both were selling rides that cost less than the fuel to complete them. Commuters gleefully booked 5,000 rupiah trips across the city, knowing full well it made no sense. Drivers learned to work the system, running both apps at once to chase whichever bonus paid more that day, and regulators scrambled just to keep up with what was even happening. And it wasn't just drivers. Food couriers, grocery pickers, cleaners, and hundreds of thousands of warung food stalls now got their orders through the apps. The informal economy hadn't been disrupted, it had been digitized. And once it was digital, it became legible for the first time. Trackable, insurable, financeable. A driver with a rating and a transaction history could suddenly reach loans and financial products that the traditional banks had never offered him. So what does all of this actually mean? Not just for Indonesia, but for the rest of the world. These usually get filed away as Southeast Asian tech success stories. But what happened in Jakarta is arguably more instructive than what happened in Silicon Valley. It proved something the Valley often misses. The most powerful technology doesn't invent new behavior, it finds a system people already use, earns their trust, and makes it work better. The Ojek driver was never a problem waiting to be solved. He was already a solution, one that had run for decades without any infrastructure. Gojek simply gave him that infrastructure. And in doing that, it didn't just build a company, it built a layer of economic architecture that now sits underneath the daily lives of hundreds of millions of people. In 2021, Gojek merged with Tokopedia, Indonesia's biggest e-commerce platform, to form GoTo. At its peak, it was worth nearly $40 billion, and it came to control a huge slice of Indonesia's digital economy, ride-hailing, e-commerce, payments, even cloud. It was Indonesia's answer to Amazon, except built from the bottom up, starting with a single motorbike driver at a street corner, holding a coffee and checking his phone. And the story isn't over. Look at Jakarta today. The same streets, but transformed. Indonesia is a massive nation of nearly 290 million people, and smartphone use is still climbing. E-commerce is still climbing, and millions are reaching formal financial services for the very first time. Whatever comes next in this story, the foundation laid in the gridlock of Jakarta's streets will be underneath it. That's all Indonesia for today. We started with a parking lot that stretched to the sea, and we ended with one of the most remarkable economic transformations in modern Asian history. Built on the back of a motorbike, powered by a phone number, and scaled by the sheer unstoppable energy of a country that refused to let its infrastructure problems become its identity. Well, if this story opened your eyes to something about Indonesia that you didn't know before, please hit the subscribe button. Every week we go this deep on a new story from one of the most fascinating, most misunderstood countries on Earth. Drop a comment below and tell me, did you already know about Gojek? Are you Indonesian and living this story every day? Or did you watch this from the other side of the world and think, wait, why has nobody told me about this before? I want to know. I read every comment. Thank you for watching All Indonesia. I'll see you soon.